Before we begin, a reminder. This podcast discusses mature themes that may not be appropriate for all audiences. Please listen with care.
Why is this one thing where we have this kind of like trepanation level, ice pick in the skull level of care, and we're like, oh yeah, we've perfected it. This is it. It's the only option. Or otherwise, they'll kill themselves. Like I, in retrospect, with a clear mind, I could look back and see why the heck didn't anyone try other ways to help me? I guess because, like, they didn't have any other ways, but
Right.
why weren't there?
This is Honorata. Today we will hear Honorata's experience with medical transition, and we'll also talk with Dr. Paul Hruz, an endocrinologist, about what we know and what we don't know when it comes to the causes of gender dysphoria and how to treat it. We will also hear how, in the midst of transition, Honorata mysteriously found her way back to God and back into the church. Honorata's story doesn't fit any of the standard culture war narratives about gender and transition. No matter what your opinion is on these issues, her experience will challenge you. I'm Abigail Fulbali, and you're listening to the Gender Accompaniment Project. This is episode 6, Medicine and Mystery.
I'm Honorata. I am a writer who also has a normal job in the United States. I consider myself a person of trans experience because I lived as a female to male transsexual for about 5 to 7 years, and now I don't know what I'm doing.
Honorata grew up in a nominally Catholic family with devout grandparents.
I think it's probably because of them that I went to CCD and I got my sacraments, but we were not very religious at home at all. We maybe went for Christmas and Easter, and then after I got confirmed, that was pretty much it. We stopped going. I wasn't really an atheist, not in the sort of like crusading way, but I was very cavalier about everything, and that kind of ties into my feelings about gender and what I was experiencing, because from a young age, I just had, and this is the hardest thing to explain, which is a sensation I'm imagining most people didn't spend most of their lives feeling, which is feeling like I didn't exist in my body.
When Honorata hit puberty, this feeling of alienation from her body got worse.
I felt very sort of dissociated. I would describe it as like wearing a mascot suit, but it was my skin. So I really couldn't like interact with the world in a real way most of the time. And it was a really distressing, upsetting way to live. But I also just figured like, well, this is it. This is what I got. I just got to keep going. I must be messed up some way. I just got to deal with it. And I spent many nights as a teenager lying awake. I would have these thoughts like, if I was a boy, all this would be so much easier. I don't think I would have these problems. But then I would think, oh, well, that's ridiculous. You can't do that. And I also knew that I experienced same-sex attraction, but it also wasn't as big a deal for me as feeling like I felt like it didn't matter who I was attracted to, because I felt like I didn't exist. And that was much more disturbing. I had this sort of cavalier attitude about God because it was like, well, it doesn't really matter. I don't exist. I was in this distress. I struggled with depression, suicidality as a young person. I graduated high school and went to college and was, I guess, trying to figure out why I felt the way that I felt. And somebody said, that sounds like gender dysphoria. And I'm like, what's that? And somebody described it as more or less how I was feeling. I felt like I was disconnected from my body. I felt like maybe if I was a man, things would be different. But the funny thing was, I was at a women's college when this happened. I had no problem being a woman, like, socially. I was never told that I was expected to do a certain thing or not do a certain thing because I was a girl. there was a hot second where I was sort of interested in aerospace engineering before I figured out I couldn't do physics, and everyone was really excited about this, and then I ended up disappointing them. um, but no, like I was very much encouraged to pursue what I was interested in: music, writing, languages, stuff like that. Yeah, I went to a women's college, and I just didn't see any limitations to being a girl or a woman. But I had this bizarre experience of the world that I was trying to articulate. And people said, okay, that sounds like gender dysphoria. I said, okay, yeah, that really does. And it rocked my world for a really long time because I had to sit and think about it. The implications were huge. So I tried to do it just socially for a while because I was scared of the medical treatments. And it was at the time that I was doing it, not in the popular zeitgeist at all. So it was very scary to me. But I was trying to work, and I was in a situation where materially everything in my life was quite awesome. But I was miserable, and I felt like I didn't exist, and I didn't know what to do, and nobody could help me. I saw a lot of therapists, and only once I started telling them certain things did they say, oh yeah, you definitely fit the profile for gender dysphoria. I'm going to write you a letter for transition. So I decided to take those steps because I was on the verge of taking a step that I'm glad I didn't take, because I wouldn't be here today.
Instead of taking the typical path, which would be starting testosterone, Honorata started with surgery.
I accidentally, because of my situation, I transitioned backwards a little bit. I got surgery before I had hormones, and I really didn't know if it was going to do anything for me. I didn't have any expectations. And then as I recovered, I found, to my shock, that I recognized myself in the mirror more often, which was unusual. And I felt like I existed when I walked down the street, which was bizarre. And I was like, oh, okay, so maybe this is the way I should be going. Maybe this is the treatment that I should pursue.
Honorata started to accept that these treatments might be helping her symptoms. She was much less sure, however, about the philosophical framework behind those treatments.
When I accepted that gender dysphoria might be something that I was feeling, there was a framework and a worldview that came with that. And I guess you could call it gender ideology or gender, whatever it was. The gender way of looking at things was that I had this male soul that was trapped in my female body, and I had to change my body to match my soul. And I was desperate for a framework that helped me understand the distress that I was feeling. And so I guess one of the things that is important to be clear about is at this time, I was just really mixed up. I wasn't thinking straight. I was very dissociated, and I was desperate for some kind of stability, something that made sense, because nothing made sense in my life. And so this thing seemed to make sense. I was like, okay, people are telling me this is real and this is the thing. And, I've pursued this treatment and it seems to be working. Okay. And so I really wanted to make it work because I thought that's my chance to get out of this haze and to maybe not, be depressed or dissociated anymore. But my problem was that I wasn't really able to buy into it all the way. I wanted to, but there was stuff like, I still got ovaries, and I would probably have to get them checked out at some point in my life, right? And then there were people who were telling me, no, those are your testicles. Like, I just wasn't willing to take that on. Like, and also, like, my whole life up to that point, most of, from birth up until my mid to late 20s, I was a woman. I went to a women's college. I was a Girl Scout. Am I supposed to pretend that didn't happen or like rewrite my past? And I guess there are some people that do that. But for me, I was like, I'm on a path to try and live really honestly. And part of that is acknowledging that I'm a woman with a really weird medical condition. But anyways, at this point, I hadn't started hormones and I really wanted the gender thing to work. I went on for as long as I could, and I was at a kind of crisis point where I thought, I'm in trouble. There's no I don't see any end to this feeling that I'm feeling, and this seems like the only treatment option available to me. That's what people are telling me. So I decided to go on hormones, and I really didn't believe that they were going to do anything, but I didn't have any other choice as I saw it. And nobody was really offering me any other choice. All through this time, I was seeing therapists who were very nice people, but they didn't really help me by offering other options or speaking to me, I guess, frankly. And I did a poor job maybe of explaining what I was feeling, because I was just in this haze, this cocoon of, I don't know, it's hard to describe. I was really just living in this muddy world. And about 6 months into the hormone treatment, it's very interesting. At this point in my life, I was keeping a diary, and what I think I meant to do was write about what I did every day, but instead I ended up writing about like how I wanted to die every day. And then I recently went back through this diary, and it's crazy because you can watch me slowly. I stop feeling that way. I stop writing about it. And then I start writing, how long has it been since I felt depressed? And then, a couple of months later, I wrote that I was seriously nervous that I had hit my head, maybe in my sleep, because I was an insomniac. I had a lot of sleep problems. And I thought, I think I have some kind of head trauma because I've been feeling like happy and it's not going away. And so like I was feeling suddenly these emotions so clearly that I never felt in a way that I never felt before. And over time, I was on the hormones for about 5 years. These crazy improvements happened that I can't explain to this day.
Wow.
I had cognitive improvements that were like, suddenly all that mud in front of me cleared. I could see the world in a lot better ways. I could see my relationships so much more clearly. I could participate in my relationships so much more clearly. I was able to reconnect with my parents, which was a really, difficult thing. It become very strained as I was transitioning and suffering, and I wasn't able to really tell them what I was feeling. And then suddenly I was able to communicate. I was able to feel very clearly. And among those benefits, that sort of cognitive clarity that I got, I had this crazy thought that I don't know what I believe. And I'm suddenly bothered by that.
Honorata's story is about to take another surprising turn. But before we follow her there, I want to pause and reflect on her experience so far. When I look at the media coverage about medical transition in our culture, two standard narratives emerge. First, the pro-transition narrative, the claim that people who experience gender dysphoria are innately trans, that they really are the gender they identify as, and transition is medically necessary and beneficial. Then there are the transition skeptics, who emphasize the lack of high-quality evidence behind gender-affirming care and the risks of physical harm, and reject the claim that those who experience gender dysphoria are actually the opposite sex. What fascinates me about Honorata's story is that it doesn't map easily onto either narrative. On the one hand, she acknowledges that she experienced some therapeutic benefits from transition. Her symptoms of bodily dissociation improved. She was less distressed and no longer suicidal. Yet she could never totally buy into the ideological framework that most often accompanies transition. The idea that she's somehow really a man, despite having a female body. She never had a problem identifying as a woman. And she's also honest about the drawbacks of hormones and the physical risks that led her to eventually stop taking them altogether.
I've been off hormones for most of the year, and I'm still sane. This is just crazy. Like, hormones are so powerful. it might be worth sharing this. I don't,
Yeah, if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear you talk more about that experience on hormones.
it was just wild. So, I mentioned that it lifted my mood, but it was so much more than that. It had those weird cognitive improvements. I had a very stable mood. I've heard women talk about going on testosterone and they had trouble with anger. I had the opposite of that. I was
Wow.
chill and I felt like I could handle things that had before made me crumble into this like puddle of anxiety. And
Hmm.
now having come off of the hormones, some incredible things have happened. Some less than incredible things have happened. Started getting PMS again.
Oh
And
no.
I have to keep myself in check like, "Oh, you're being irritable today." Yeah.
Hmm.
Um but I'm a writer and the way that that used to be like my thing. And for a while even before I transitioned, I had become so depressed that I really couldn't access that creative energy very well without like a lot of force. And when I took hormones, it became even harder to access that. I stopped writing
Wow.
almost completely. And then about 2 months or so after I stopped hormones, I found that creative wellspring just kind of rise up like this huge tide. And I
Wow.
fell in love with my projects again. And I was in the zone and I was so ecstatic. It was just like I got a part of myself back that I had
Wow.
lost. So it's all very complicated. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to say like hormones good, no hormones bad.
No.
It's just been this bizarre ride. And I'm happy to be at the point where I am at with it.
Yeah. Oh, can I mean, again, anytime I ask a question, you're like, I don't want to go there. You can just say that. But why did you decide to stop hormones?
There were two reasons for it. I was very scared because I became so well and sane and happy after taking them. I suddenly wanted to live a good, long, healthy life. And then I realized that continuing to take cross-sex hormones, and I started hearing all these stories, that people, and I knew this at the beginning, obviously, but I was in a crisis situation. There's no
Right.
long term evidence on what this does to anybody. The oldest female to male transsexual is in his 60s,
Hmm.
and he seems lucky. I don't think I have the constitution that he does.
Hmm.
Um, I've always been a little bit medically uh, like a delicate flower. And I thought, well, I want to live a long, healthy life if I can. I should try to be healthy. And then the other half of it was, I want to live honestly, and I don't have any particular social attachment to being a man. So
Hmm.
why not?
The complexities of Honorata's experiences resist the simplistic narratives on offer in the culture wars. So, what actually do we know about the causes of gender dysphoria and the efficacy of medical transition? And maybe more to the point, what don't we know?
I'm Paul Hruz. I'm an academic pediatric endocrinologist and physician scientist who has devoted my entire career to the treatment of endocrine diseases in children.
As the gender affirmative model has gained prominence in the field of endocrinology, Dr. Hruz has closely followed the evidence, publishing and speaking regularly on this topic. I first asked him about what we know regarding the underlying causes of gender dysphoria. His answer? Not much.
So, if we look at all of the possibilities for what causes gender dysphoria, we're really left with an incomplete answer. I think the best that we can say is that this is a condition that is multifactorial. There's likely different factors that differ in both nature and degree in any one individual.
Multifactorial. So, there are many different possible factors at play, both genetic and environmental. And we don't yet clearly understand how those factors interact to cause gender dysphoria. In fact, I'm not convinced we're talking about one single condition. I've had many conversations with people who have experienced gender dysphoria, but there are striking differences among these experiences. Honorata remarked on this too.
For the longest time, I thought what I experienced was bog standard gender dysphoria. And I don't actually know if that's a thing anymore. because I started listening to other people, and I started listening to a lot of interviews of transition people and detransition people, and basically everybody, every single person has a different experience, like everyone. And you can start categorizing people's experiences vaguely, but everyone's going to be different. And that was humbling to me. I was like, oh, okay. You know, I was going out and making proclamations about, like, well, this is dysphoria and this is not. Well, I had no idea that everybody was different.
Honorata is right. There is no just so story of gender dysphoria, no paradigmatic experience. This makes me wonder how useful the category of gender dysphoria actually is. Is it helpful to have one diagnostic term to capture such a broad range of experiences and distress? Is it reasonable to assume they all have the same underlying cause? And does it make sense to have only one default mode of treatment, especially one that involves invasive and irreversible treatments? I asked Dr. Hruz about this.
I think it's very helpful, actually, to have those conversations and to understand the lived experience of these individuals that are suffering from this condition, and also to recognize they are truly suffering and they're looking for relief of that suffering. But try to understand, are we providing interventions that are truly helpful? So there's much that we do in medicine that can alleviate suffering in a temporary way that fails to recognize what the underlying problem is, does not provide lasting help to that individual, but may actually be very beneficial in the short run. There is good evidence, actually, in the short run that when you engage in affirmative medical interventions, that there's short-term relief in that underlying anxiety and distress that occurs. But one needs to consider it in the context is that merely putting a Band-Aid on a festering wound, which is not going to heal until you do the necessary investigation of the cause and provide a lasting healing. To touch upon the question of hormone interventions, we do know that these sex steroid hormones do have significant effects in the brain. We know that there's a euphoric effect of giving testosterone, increased energy, increased sense of well-being. We know this in treating males that have hypogonadism. There is a calming effect in giving estrogen to a male so that they will report a very significant change in their mood. And a lot of that is based upon physiologic effects of those sex steroid hormones. So I do recognize, and it's not surprising, that these effects of a female getting testosterone or a male getting estrogen has significant effects on mood and even alleviation of one's dysphoria. But I think it's a leap of logic then to conclude that one has identified the cause from that experience just because of what we know about how these sex steroid hormones work. And if one is treating this without recognizing the underlying problem, it's very unlikely to lead to lasting alleviation of that suffering, even if there's an immediate effect. But we have to look at what's available in the scientific literature about the experiences long term. And again, I want to come back to what I said earlier, that this is a likely multifactorial condition with differing insults in any individual. So I don't want to generalize in any one individual and predict that one has a potential answer. It's a very difficult problem, and it requires a lot of investigation to what are the underlying contributing factors. But what we do see is that as a whole, is that many individuals that undergo these interventions and have reports of relief of their dysphoria, it takes many years for them to recognize that it didn't fix the underlying problems because it never really addressed the underlying problems. And I think that in the adult literature, the average age is about 8 to 10 years before one recognizes that, and that's from larger population-based studies. And many times in the studies that have been done on these individuals, they've really had very short-term follow-up, really looking in that, what we often say, the honeymoon phase after an intervention. And there are many patients, when you've tried to follow them longitudinally, that are lost to follow-up. And we have no idea what happens with those individuals. And we can hypothesize that if it didn't fix the underlying problem, they may be lost to follow-up for a variety of reasons that indicate that they're not dissatisfied. We really can't say anything about the outcome.
Last year, I did extensive research into the evidence base for gender affirming care because, well, I didn't want to be an ideologue. I genuinely want to know what the evidence tells us. And I discovered that what Dr. Hruz is saying here is right. The efficacy of this treatment model is unclear. Many of the studies that exist have severe limitations. The sample sizes tend to be small, which means it's hard to generalize about the results. There is a high rate of attrition or loss to follow-up, which refers to initial participants in a study whose outcomes are unknown. Higher rates of attrition, over 20% or so, seriously compromise a study's validity because those lost participants may have a different outcome than the ones who remain in the study. Perhaps the most significant limitation is the lack of research on long-term outcomes. This is particularly important because medical transition is a long-term process, and many associated health risks are linked to the duration of cross-sex hormone use. So there are two important questions to follow here. First, is the treatment effective in treating gender dysphoria? And secondly, does the treatment come with risks or unwanted side effects? The efficacy, as we've discussed, is unclear. So what about the potential for harm?
Because of the significant risks that one assumes in surgical interventions, I think there's much more work that needs to be done. And I will say that we really don't have the scientific information that we need to make an adequate assessment on that question. For a female that has a bilateral mastectomy, they will never be able to breastfeed. And in giving steroid hormones, it can have significant effects on future fertility, even if one decides that one wants to detransition. And so if there's an alternative approach that addresses the underlying reason for that sex discordant gender identity that doesn't carry those significant medical risks, this is something that would be much more helpful for that individual, even if they're equal. And I would say that there's a hypothesis that they may actually be superior. So it's a difficult question that many people, and I see this in my own profession, if you've got a hammer, everything that you see is a nail. So if you've got something in your toolbox that you can give to somebody and they report that they feel better with that, one has a desire to be able to give that, when the harder task is to actually dig down and try to identify what's going on.
In recent years, several European countries are recognizing and responding to the lack of supporting evidence for gender-affirming care, especially for young people. After conducting systematic evidence reviews, Sweden, Finland, the United Kingdom, and Norway have concluded that the supposed benefits of medicalization do not outweigh the known risks. There are two criteria that have to be met in order for a treatment model to be considered evidence-based. First, there needs to be a systematic review of the existing evidence. Second, the treatment protocols need to link the strength of the recommendation to the quality of the evidence. In February of 2023, a report in the British Medical Journal revealed that the gender affirmative model fails to meet those two criteria. Every single systematic review of the evidence for medical transition has reached the same conclusion. The evidence is inconclusive and low in quality. In other words, we can't say with any confidence that gender-affirming care is beneficial to people experiencing gender dysphoria, but we can say that it poses known and unknown risks.
I think that we all like to believe that we practice evidence-based medicine. We all want to do the best we can for the patients that we serve. This is just an application of good scientific principles and good medicine to the care of the patients that we serve. This is what we do in all other areas of medicine. It's not unique in that there are things that we are asked to treat that we don't fully understand. In all other areas of medicine that I'm aware of, when we're confronted with a lack of evidence and uncertainty and serious risks with questionable benefits, if we are to proceed, we do so with the utmost of caution. And we're unfortunately not seeing that in this area. We have really jettisoned really the basic principles of evidence-based medicine. We've been comfortable operating on the level of what we call eminence-based medicine. It's because I say so, not because there's evidence to support that. And I think that's a detriment. It's certainly a detriment to our profession. It leads to loss of credibility with the public, that when we're not doing science in the way that it is normally done, but it's a disservice to the patients that we serve as well.
That's one of the things that I'm kind of mournfully making peace with through my life, is that the way that the discussions are going now, I'm never going to find out what was wrong with me. Like, there is something real to this, and it bothers me, and for other people who may be feeling this, because I'm not sitting here trying to recommend that anybody do this. I actually wouldn't wish this condition or the cure on my best friend or my worst enemy. Nobody. And I really, really wish we lived in a world where people were trying to actually get to the bottom of this and find healthier ways to do these things. But that's just not where we're at right now. But I've ranted a lot to something like a bandage, a Band-Aid. We improve the technology of that over time so that they're better, they help people heal faster. Why is this one thing where we have this kind of like trepanation level, ice pick in the skull level of care for, and we're like, oh yeah, we've perfected it. This is it. It's the only option. Or otherwise, they'll kill themselves. Like, I, in retrospect, with a clear mind, I could look back and see, why the heck didn't anyone try other ways to help me? I guess because, they didn't have any other ways, but
Right.
Why weren't there? Why aren't people asking those questions? And obviously some people are, but it's, it seems like everybody's against them, looking into less invasive ways to help people live with this. So yeah, it gets me all riled up.
I think that we have to recognize that these individuals are suffering, and we need to approach this experience by doing more to listen, to be able to be better listeners, to be empathetic, but to be helpful. I think that we need to be focused on really the good for everyone, and including these people that are suffering. And it requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of understanding. But it does, I would say, still require maintenance of grounding in truth, and in both in the scientific and theological dimensions of that. We can't jettison what we know about biology. That's not compassion. That's not loving that individual. And I think that has been the language that is being used really to silence conversation and discussion is quite harmful. And I see this actually on both ends, that there isn't dialogue. There isn't a genuine desire to listen and understand people that have different perspectives. In the scientific community, that is how we arrive at all of our advances in medicine, is that we do have individuals with differing hypotheses and different approaches, and we enter into dialogue and we let the evidence speak for itself. But we are cautious about making too firm of conclusions when they're not justified. And I think on both sides of the question, we need to acknowledge the limitations of what we know and what we don't know. And if we can engage in better dialogue, I think we're going to likely have a much better chance of making a difference.
Whatever conclusions one might draw about the ethics of medical transition, one thing is clear. Part of Honorata's story is that these treatments played a role in her journey back to God. Do you feel like you could just pick up the story right there? Where did this kind of spiritual seeking start, and what did that look like?
Sure. Once I got out of that mascot suit and was in the world for real, I realized, the way I saw things is I was just kind of this sack of meat and it didn't really matter what happened to me. I now understand that it matters, and maybe there's something above me. Maybe there's something that is more than people, more than just the material world. And so then I went down this spiritual, I mean, it ended up being spiritual. I didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to figure out what I believed. After I had my surgery, I had more brain space to think. And so I had started asking those questions. What do I believe? And I had this terrible thought that if somebody had questioned any of the things that I believed, I would have just melted into a puddle of tears because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have anything to stand on. I'm really just like repeating memes.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to really like raise everything down to the foundation, which was terrifying. I wanted to get down into the bottom of things. I was at a debate one night where two atheists were debating the existence of God. And I was like, this is going to be fun. The atheist who was debating God didn't exist said he was having a hard time supporting the idea of secular morality because every source of his morals was coming from Christianity. And so the other guy pointed this out and he said, you know, if you act on this and this and this and this, but you don't go to church, you're still a Christian. You're just too afraid to admit it. And I felt like he was saying that to me. And I remember that night, it was miserable and cold and rainy. And I probably should have taken the bus home, but I walked and was just kind of like, dang, I'm a Christian, aren't I? I have to read the Bible.
Well,
Because I'd gone to CCD, but I couldn't tell you a single Bible story. Like it was all
yeah.
gone. It was out of my head. Um, which is a terrible thing. I kind of wish I was able to be awake when I got my sacraments, but you know, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still happy to have had the journey that I've had. But anyways, yeah, that was the start. And I thought, okay, well, I grew up Catholic, so let's try something different. And so I basically went church shopping for the next couple of years. And now all this time, it was during the pandemic. So it was during a time when a lot of churches were live streaming their services.
Mm-hmm.
And so a nearby Catholic church would do live stream masses, and I was secretly watching them. And I didn't know why I was so attracted to them. I thought, oh, you know, the liturgy is familiar. That's probably why. I remember it from being from as a kid. And it was hard during the pandemic. There was a lot of isolation and it was a
Mm-hmm.
real test of my newfound mental health, but I made it through and I think prayer was a huge part of that. But one of the things that I did, which would have made me a very naughty Protestant, was I decided to pray a novena to Saint Teresa of Avila. And I know that she's a saint of writers. And I thought, I don't know about this saint stuff, but sure, why not? I'll give this a try. And it was amazing. It was just a very spiritually enriching experience. And I thought, I should probably give Catholicism a more serious look. Towards the end of that year, I went to my local church and gave my first confession in 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really just powerful. I just had this really incredible experience. And I've had a lot of really nice priests. That guy was a champ. It was this beautiful old New England church. It was a cold day. And they had confessionals in the church, but he took confessions on a bunch of overturned banana boxes behind a curtain in the back of the church. And so I won't be forgetting it anytime soon. He was a very nice priest.
Yeah. And how did he receive that? Like, what do you remember?
I was
How
a
he
mess. There was
responded?
a whole lot worse about my confession, I think, than saying that. I had studied and practiced, and I still messed everything up. So
Wow.
he was just very gracious. He didn't say very much, and
Mm-hmm.
I think he gave me 3 Hail Marys, and I left being like, "That's it."
Oh, I've had experiences like that, right? Where I feel like I have like a real doozy of a confession. And then they just give me like an Our Father. I was like, really? Come on. That was worth it. It's like a rosary.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
left feeling like that's 16 years of sins, and that's all I get. And I knelt down to pray in that beautiful church, and I thought, okay, that's not the point of confession.
Mm-hmm.
And I look over to my right, and there's this beautiful stained glass window of Saint Teresa that I'd sat next to. And that was just kind of a little kind slap in the face.
Yeah.
Like, hey, stop complaining. You're in the right spot. I fell in love with the Mass now that I understand it. And that's really that's my big thing. It's why I go every week, is I just love the Mass and I love the Eucharist, and there's nothing in the world that's like it.
I wonder, could you say more about why you love the Mass?
Sure, it kind of all happened from trying to understand what the Mass was. And before, I didn't really understand what was so different from the Mass versus any other church service. And so part of that was I had to experience other church services. And there was this one point where I was at a church and the people were super nice, the community was great, and I was looking for community. But I felt like I was at an office party where everybody else just happened to love Jesus too. And that was why we were there. And I would be at the service and they would pass out little grape juice cups and crackers. And I'm like, I can't do that. That just doesn't seem right. And I was like, I think I'm looking for something a little bit more. And I had been secretly watching these Mass live streams, and I had been taking it in kind of like a song where you know the beats, but you're not really thinking about it too much. And now I was analyzing it. I was studying it in a deep way and started to understand there was also this element of time, that time is different for God. And, you know, when you're praying, there's something kind of funny happening there. There's something kind of mysterious happening there. And same with the Mass, there is this travel element where you are participating in those things in a very literal way, just as you are very literally consuming the body of Christ. And so I started to understand that more and more deeply. And as I did, I thought, there is nothing in the world that is like this. And I was going through a lot of other changes in my life, like professionally, materially, moving and all that. I would have days where I was having just a really hard time. Everything was overwhelming, and I could run from my workplace to a nearby church for the noon Mass. And there were other people doing the exact same thing. They just needed help that day. And through all of those crises, I could put everything there, everything that I was going through in the Mass. I could ask for forgiveness. I could receive grace. I could pray with other people and pray for them there. I could receive this healing. It was everything. It was everything that I needed.
Are there any other like spiritual, devotional practices or saints or anything that have been particularly meaningful to you?
One of the most powerful moments that I had was in prayer. I had a very crummy prayer life. Crummy because I was terrified of Jesus. He was like somebody that I felt I couldn't stand before. And it felt like true Christianity and true belief was this party that was happening in another room. And the door was open. I just had to walk into the other room, but I was too scared to do it. And I was also in a personally kind of a difficult situation in my life. And I reached a point of crisis, and I was really in trouble. I was at a point where materially I was about to have pretty much nothing. And so feeling panic for the first time in a very long time, a voice in my head was like, you should pray the rosary. And I was like, but I don't know how to pray the rosary. And the voice was like, well, you watched those videos of Bishop Barron praying the rosary. Yeah, but I didn't know all the prayers. And so I found myself on my knees. I went from 0 to 54-day novena, and that changed my life in a really intense way. That novena, that 54 days, I did a diary for every day, mostly to help me because I have a hard time counting that high. And during that diary, I saw myself really just get into the stories, get into the mysteries to understand Mary. And I just fell in love with her, and I became way less scared of Jesus. And I would say probably in the last year or so, I've actually felt more in love with him than being scared, which is very good.
That's so beautiful. That Mary showed you her son,
Yeah, that was exactly it.
I wanted to ask Honorata about how her spiritual awakening intersected with her experience of gender. After all, everything happening in her life at this time, her intense conversion, her growing love for the Mass, for Christ, for Mary. All of that unfolded during a time when she was living and presenting as a man. As you went through this kind of reversion back to Christianity and this awakening, how did that relate to the stuff you were going through on the gender side?
Before, I had assumed, if I'm successful in my transition and I feel good, I will just disappear into society as a regular man. And I found as I went along my spiritual path, I'm like, no, I can't really do that. And I don't want to, because it would be denying this reality of myself. And there wasn't really anywhere to talk about that. Like, I was trying to catechize myself on the internet. It was like Catholic Answers, Reddit, Discord, Pints of the Aquinas. I was just looking everywhere.
So funny. That is so true. Like, how many people, like, that's their catechism experience. Yeah, totally.
You would see people there like, I experience same-sex attraction, or even sometimes I have gender dysphoria. I don't really know what to do. And even the most well-meaning charitable person in those circles is like, I don't know what you should do either. So I just kind of put it on the back burner because everything else that I was experiencing was so life-changing. It was like kind of earth-shattering. I started seeking out communities, and I saw a lot of the communities that were Catholic and LGBT were very much tied to the secular LGBT, I guess, framework or way of understanding things. But I came to view the framework that people were operating on in most secular LGBT spaces as a kind of secular religion that was opposed to Christianity, or as I understood it, Christianity. And I just didn't want anything to do with that. Even though I wasn't in LGBT circles, being an artistic type person, you run into just naturally a lot of other gay and trans people. And so I became acquainted with it through them and how they were talking about things. And it seemed like people saw it as an opportunity to make your own reality. You can make a reality that you find comfortable in. You can make a body that you find yourself more comfortable in. And it's the world's problem if they don't want to accept that. And again, I wanted to believe that, but there were limits to that. I thought, okay, I get it. And I even had a point where, if a person came to me, like obviously male, but would come out to me as, a trans woman, I would, in my mind, just be like, okay, that's a woman now. And then I had this moment kind of at the beginning of my hormone journey where I kind of gave myself permission to stop pretending to be a man, because I just didn't want to be in men's social spaces. I don't think I'm masculine. I have no idea. It would shock you to hear this, a very poor self-concept as someone who only recently started recognizing myself in the mirror.
Wow.
So I have no idea what I look like to other people or sound like or anything like that. So I wasn't eager to get in with the guys. And I also didn't want to deny the whole story of me and my past. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to drop the gender framework that I had been given for my condition. And I gave myself permission to do that. And that was pretty much at about the time that Uber drivers started calling me like chief and boss. And so I started being acknowledged as a man socially. So it was from there on kind of a very awkward dance where I routinely forgot that everybody can't tell that I'm not a man. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Like, I don't have any answers for where I should go from here. This isn't something that I can reverse very easily, the physical stuff.
Would you be willing to talk more about what your experience is like in the church right now?
Yeah. It's been difficult. I'm in a new place relatively. Moved here last year, and I thought, well, maybe this is my chance. I'll get involved with the church community, but I feel, not from anybody in particular, from myself, I feel like I can't join anything, honestly, because then I feel like I'm lying or trying to deceive somebody. I just don't know how it's going to go off. And in my bad mental health moments, I have these moments where a priest is looking at me and I think, can he tell?
Mm-hmm.
Like, does he want to withhold communion from me because he thinks I am, something I'm not? Stuff like that. I'll be very nervous, but I'm trying to find a way in. And I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the hardest things is because there's so many popular narratives around this condition, and there are so many voices saying different things about it, that whatever I say might not actually be heard in the way that I'm saying it. It might be clouded by all these other things. And I certainly don't blame anybody, because it's this huge hot topic, and, what are you supposed to make of it? Um, and so I'm nervous to approach random local priest, and I feel like I'm putting upon them this huge burden by asking for a little bit of spiritual guidance or how to get into the church. So I stay away. At the same time, do you ever listen to or watch Jonathan Pageau, the
Yeah,
Orthodox
yeah, I know who you're
icon
talking
carver?
about. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He was one of the guys I was listening to when I was questioning whether I was a Christian, and his symbolic view of the world was just amazing. It really added this depth to my understanding of the Bible and my understanding of the Christian worldview. And Pageau is really into these very old icons of the dog-headed Saint Christopher. I don't know if you've ever heard him talk about that. Saint Christopher was depicted as this kind of tall, scary guy on the margins, and some people, for various reasons, depicted him in iconography with the head of a dog. And so he's this kind of outsider freak who nobody, like, he doesn't quite fit in, yet he stands there at the river on this marginal area. And so, Pageau talks about it very symbolically, at this time of transition, at this place of transition between one place and another, one time and another, he is able to carry Christ on his back. And there are icons of a lot of saints listening to the gospel being heard, and there's the dog-headed Saint Christopher. And among all of these great saints, even this strange person is able to hear the gospel. And so I think about that sometimes when I'm in church, and I think I shouldn't be here. And then I think, I'm here for a reason. God wants me here. Even if I'm strange, there's a job that he has for me to do. One of the experiences that I had as I was dipping my toes into church community, a very nice lady once asked me after confession to go to a talk that was happening at the church that evening. It was a talk about the theology of the body. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. Okay, I'll go. And I think it was meant to be about one subject, but the participants at the talk really were desperate for help from the speaker, because their children were coming to them with questions about gender and transition and things like that. And I was sitting here, this unsuspecting, seemingly normal person, and this woman was a little bit flummoxed by a lot of these questions. And I thought, oh boy, if I could stand up here and talk to them about this stuff.
Like, if you could, in that moment, have stood up and said something, do you have a sense of what you would have wanted to say?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just like how to interact with other people with love, but affirm your kid. Like, you don't have to change anything about yourself the way you are. Like, don't try to hem people in. And I think also one of the things coming into Catholic circles from the outside that I didn't realize was how many kids grow up with very strict gender expectations on them that I didn't have to worry about. And so to me, things that seem obvious, like, oh, it's okay to be a little bit masculine in a girl. Like, I went to college and the rugby team was terrifying and they were all girls. It didn't make them any less girly. So I don't know, just trying to broaden ideas of gender without just smashing everything and saying that you can remake reality. Like, trying to find healthy boundaries, I guess, would be something I'd be interested in talking with people about. But at that moment, I felt like I was some kind of half outsider, because I couldn't speak the theology language. I couldn't speak the Christianese. But I also had thrown off this worldview that these parents were now encountering. And I wanted to warn them about how dark it can get. Like I was talking about my friends who lived in the paradigm, and I would encounter people who were really suffering, and the way that they tried to alleviate that suffering was moving further and further away from their body, further and further away from their reality. It went all the way to like transhumanism kind of stuff, like trying to be like an animal or an alien or an object. And like it goes down at the very bottom to some very dark stuff. And there's no real guardrails to stop it. So I would want to warn people about that.
Wow. This anecdote is so striking to me. A parish talk on gender and theology of the body, and Honorata in the audience, able to speak with firsthand knowledge about the dangers of the new gender paradigm, but also why someone who is suffering would look to transition as a solution. Her story here is such a powerful resource, and yet she feels like she can't share it, that she can't be fully open with her parish community. When I listen to your story, the frustration I feel is like I hear in your story this desire to live honestly. But it sounds like you almost feel like you kind of have to hide in the church right now because is that, I don't know, is that accurate? Do you feel like you couldn't be honest about who you are?
I could probably try. I just feel like preemptively bad for anyone to try and understand my situation, because in particular, I feel like I'm in a strange spot where I transitioned, but I don't care if I'm seen as a man or a woman. Like I don't have any particular attachment to being seen as a man. And I think the popular understanding of that is that I would. So I feel like I'm just going to like confuse and stress out a poor local, like exasperated priest with a very full schedule, or, you know, confuse the nice ladies at the church garden when I'm trying to, you know, participate. But I guess, you know, I don't know. I feel like I really can't take a step in, because if I try to join a community that I want to join for any amount of time, let's say I'm able to find a way to present more feminine, then it seems like I've been lying to them this whole time. Then if I'm honest to them from the outset, I'm just like needlessly confusing them maybe. So I don't really know the first step to take.
Yeah.
And then there's this other thing that I think I just have to get over, and the dog-headed St. Christopher, thinking about that kind of helps me get over it. But I don't like want to be seen as a curiosity or like a spectacle. But I think there's also nothing that can really be done about that. And I kind of have to just own it, that I am this person who came in from the margins, and I'm very happy to be here. And I just have to kind of own my experiences and understand, like, oh, your dreams of just kind of slipping into the world invisibly, that's just a dream.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, you know, I would want the church to be a place where people who are in the margins are in the church.
Well, that's kind of why I like going to, in the communities that I've been to anyways, going to weekday and Saturday evening masses, because those tend to be the misfit masses. You get kind of like the bikers and the people who are alone, and you know, you get kind of a more mixed crowd, because you do get families as well. And that's what I kind of love about those masses that are very mixed, is that I get a sense, like sometimes I'm sitting there, and I've stopped sitting in the back all the time. I'm slowly moving my way up. And I'll sit there and think, this is great. We're all here at the hospital together to get healed.
Yes.
Or maybe we're all going to, you know, be like this, sitting like this again sometime, waiting to get into heaven. Like I just have these nice feelings. Like we're all meant to be here. That's good.
I love that, the misfit masses.
Yeah, I'm trying to have hope. Part of it is my terminal shyness. I could just try to reach out more and have a bit more courage. And maybe, you know, if this ever socially becomes less hot,
right,
it might be easier to talk about. or maybe
Yeah.
I will change physically in that time. I don't know.
Mm.
There's really no answers right now. I'm just kind of hanging on to my love of the Mass. I would love to have a Mass buddy. I would love to have like a Catholic friend in my area. But even just having one other person in my corner who kind of knows where I'm at and who can be with me, because there's other stuff like I didn't even talk about this. I can't sing anymore. I lost my
Mm.
ability to modulate my voice when my voice changed and my voice dropped. I had to learn. I'm still not very good at shouting. I had to like teach myself how to shout and things. Um, but I really can't sing, and I need to work on that. So
Mm.
it's just embarrassing. There are some embarrassing parts to being in church, but having a buddy who gets it would be
Mm.
helpful.
We're in this moment where this has become a culture war issue. The temperature's up. A lot of people are in a reactive state about this.
Yeah.
But like, how could the church better respond in this moment to people who've had experiences like you've had?
Yeah. Oh, I think number one would be understanding how different everyone's experiences are, and how it's very easy to maybe pigeonhole somebody into a certain narrative or a certain story because it's very popularly heard, and it's a big culture war issue, and the implications of somebody being involved in this can be very dark and scary. But if you could try and forget what you may have heard and just listen to the person as the person,
Right.
I think that's probably the best.
Mm.
I needed to be led very gently and in very unusual ways on this winding path to God, and specifically back to the church. And I need to take my time. I need to wrestle with things. There have been moments.
Mm-hmm.
There have been really hard moments, but that's all part of, I think, my journey. One of the reasons I'm talking to you is because I don't understand. I have a hard time understanding why I was saved from doing something stupid to myself. And I was praying last year, like, God, why did you help me? You know, I'm just this weirdo. How am I supposed to move forward as some kind of 21st century eunuch in the church? Is there a way that I can help other people? Let me know. And then when I heard about this, I thought, okay, maybe if I share my story, it will help people understand what some people are going through. Obviously, I don't think I have a normal trans story, if that's such a thing.
Right. Yeah,
But,
I don't know if there is a... Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, anything that I can do to help other people who might be struggling like me, or help other people who want to help other people who are struggling with this, I want to do it.
Yeah.
And I have these moments where sometimes I just feel like a freak, that there's really just no place for me socially in the church. And then I remember that over all these years, I was very gently, very lovingly guided by the hand through this crazy storm of incomprehensible stuff to be led to here, the foot of the cross. And I just, like, I can't turn away from that.
What would it look like for people like Honorata to feel like they don't have to hide in the church? What would it look like for them to be fully welcomed and accepted in their complexity? What would it look like for us to open our hearts to mystery? Both the mystery of the human person and the mystery of Christ, who, in every Mass, shows up in a way that defies our understanding. The Redeemer of the world himself coming to us under the humble signs of bread and wine. From the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame, you're listening to the Gender Accompaniment Project. This series is written and hosted by me, Abigail Favali. Our producers are Nick and Corinne Starsinik, and our executive producer is Noah Braden. Special thanks to Paul Hruz, and Honorata for being part of today's episode. Thanks for listening.